All right, welcome to episode 2 of Mysterious Streams, the podcast devoted to exploring the weird and strange films on Netflix, Crackle, Hulu, and beyond. I'm your host, Nicholas Peterson.
And I'm the geeky senorita, Mary Peterson. And we are joined by our friend...
Timothy Bates.
Now, Tim came into the middle of the film, but he didn't miss a lot. The film we're going to be discussing first is Gog, the 1954 science fiction film. Mary, what's your first thoughts?
My first thoughts were, again, I think I said this in the last podcast, I think that the name is very ridiculous. It was never really explained why they chose that name, and I personally like for these things to be explained, if there was some reasoning behind it.
I think it was a biblical thing.
I agree.
Yeah, it was a biblical name.
Gog and Magog go up against Israel for Israel's destruction, and Gog in this movie had some similar form to America.
Also, remember this movie was made in 1954, so maybe they're assuming some biblical knowledge based on the average audience member that a heathen like you wouldn't quite understand. So the movie...
I proudly, thank you.
Well, the movie Gog, it takes place in a research station in New Mexico. Some poor scientist gets killed very early on, gets frozen to death because their experiment... What was the purpose of the experiment again?
I think the purpose was that they were wanting to experiment with whether they could freeze astronauts before they, shoot them into space, and then once they get up there, they have some program in place to unfreeze them so it doesn't have any, damaging whatever to the astronaut.
Which I actually was fairly impressed with because cryogenics wasn't entirely a old idea in the 1950s.
I just like the image of a monkey popsicle at the very, very beginning of this movie. You just see.
She brings that up because they were experimenting on a monkey first. And the only part that I thought was awesome about that is not only was the monkey frozen and then re-thought out, the monkey clapped and was very happy, apparently, with the entire thing. I thought that was pretty cool. All right, so some scientist dies.
Yes, which apparently is, you never really want to be the last one in an experimental lab.
He was lagging behind and got frozen to death. And an investigator was called in to figure out what was going on, to check the safety of the science lab, which is 4 stories underneath the ground.
Not including the hangar.
Yes.
Where they
and they also launched helicopters. It's a pretty impressive set. It was a nice visually looking film. Unfortunately, you almost go on a tour of this thing in real time. The guy they just show him the entire station, and that takes about, not exaggerating, about 40 minutes of the film.
Also, again, the names are just ridiculous. They have this brain machine which guides the helicopter into the hangar, and then later on in the film they refer to it as the Novak, which is just this, it literally controls everything in this entire station, and I don't know why you would have 2 names for it. It's just ridiculous.
I think the brain was the thing that guided the helicopter, and the Novak was the thing
they had referred to it as a brain machine and the Novak interchangeably throughout the entire movie. It's like one person's like, the brain machine controls all of this, and the other person's like, yeah, totally, the Novak, it has control over all of these things. So I wasn't really, that was a little confusing.
It confused your woman brain, I understand.
Yeah, speaking of that, too many fragile women in this movie. You think at first there's this lady that's introduced, I don't remember her name because she's that forgettable. You think, oh, okay, she's in this high up, position in this system, and literally everyone treats her like, oh, you know what, you just don't worry your pretty little head about this. Let the men take care of it.
Yeah, no, that's a very common thing in especially 1950s films, especially science fiction films. Creature of the Black Lagoon is infamous for having a female scientist who's a doctor, but she does nothing but scream and get kidnapped for the entire film.
This woman fainted at least once in this movie.
There's a lot of scary stuff. Wait, hold on.
She got slapped because she was too hysterical at one point.
This movie did have a good slapping. Also, to be fair, a man did do the classic. Okay, so there are 2 robots in the film, Gog and Magog. I'm not sure what the purpose of the robots were, just for experiments.
Yeah, that was never really explained what they were there.
They gave one a flamethrower. and they gave the other one the power to electrocute a man to death. But at one point, one of the robots, when everything starts to go haywire, is chasing a man, and the man slips on a hammer and falls. So at least that usually is the female cliche that the females.
I really don't feel that one man tripping and falling and having this kind of female role, or however you want to say it.
Well, I'm not saying it's the female.
Makes up for it for, literally every single female is like, well, we're here, we're supposed to be really smart, but we're all actually really retarded.
Wow. A slur in our second episode. Man, saying the word retard, you're going to get us in trouble. No, I did feel bad. I looked up, there's a actor whose name escapes me, but he's the German scientist.
Wasn't it?
Well, the one who plays the German scientist.
Oh, okay.
And I looked him up on Wikipedia, and I felt bad for the guy because he actually was a young man during the Nazi occupation of
Really?
Germany, and he flees Germany, he makes it to California, and then he ends up playing Nazis and all the people who he hated that killed his family, that he detested, but because of his German accent, he got typecast into. He was a bad guy in Casablanca. Was
that him?
Well, he was one of. There was a lot of Nazis in Casablanca.
Well, I know, but I didn't realize that was him.
Yeah, but he got typecast, and he ended up playing a lot of
Jeez, poor dude.
bad roles. But he played a good guy here, even though he was the one who slipped on the hammer and got choked out by the robot.
Man, I thought for sure that was gonna be him messing with everything.
Yeah, see, you suspected
Yeah,
him.
I did.
You
and
racist.
I know. But like you said, it's usually in these types of movies, it's always a German. It's always a German.
No, in fact, you know what? They actually did in order to, because this movie was made again in the 50s during the Cold War, and they are suspecting of sabotage, but I think to make the movie a little bit more timeless, even though it does look very dated now. But they had no idea how long the Cold War was going to last. Mm-hmm. So they never mention the Russians by name. They just say, well, we might have been sabotaged by the enemy. Just in case the Russians went away at some point. We have a new enemy. And then it doesn't sound, they don't mention a dated conflict. Which was a somewhat wise move on their part.
Yeah.
But it's the Russians, though. It's wink, it's the Russians.
Not very subtle is what you're saying.
So did you enjoy it at all, or?
No, I didn't, actually.
You know what? These movies do have a tendency to be very dry.
Well, I can handle dry. It was just the whole, literally the first half of the movie, just going on this tour with this science place, which I'm not very good at science anyway, so it was annoying to me to have to watch that.
They don't even let murder get in the way of the tour. At one point,
yeah, exactly.
There's some poor lady gets killed by radiation poisoning. Hey, a lot of people die in this movie. And you think, oh my gosh, someone's dead. They're going to end the tour now and try to really figure out, nope, they don't even let that. She must have been some poor janitor because they just, she's dead, let's continue with the tour.
Speaking of that, when they did find her body, in the movie they have these little badges or whatever that can tell your radiation level.
In the movie they wear badges, and if the badges change colors, you've been exposed to radiation.
So, literally, they find her and her badge color shows that she's died of radiation. And literally, of the 3 people that's there, only one guy has a hazmat suit. And the other 2 people are just like, well, we know how she died, but apparently we're invulnerable to radiation poisoning, so we don't need a hazmat suit. And also, they stay in the room afterwards to call for backup, which is fine. But I feel like that can't be the only phone to call somebody on this thing. You're telling me you can't go out of the room where all the radiation is?
And this is also prior to the female of the 2 main characters saying how great this place was, how there's cameras, how there's TVs everywhere to help you explain things.
Yeah, exactly.
You're right. We never did see what those cameras were connected to, did we?
Mm-hmm.
They never reviewed security footage or anything. Which would have helped it, because if they reviewed the security footage, they would have seen that dumb robot running around greasing everyone.
Exactly. It's just...
And they would have seen what originally caused Gog and Magog to officially go batshit crazy.
So I guess technically it is a killer robot movie.
Yeah.
At the end, they get in a fight with the robots, and I guess they kill them? Or I think they trap one, and then they just blow up the facility. I think that's what was. It was kind of vague.
Weren't they in one of the offices though at the end of the movie?
No, they were
Or
just
was
they
that
were
in a
just in,
different
they were
one?
just
I
in
don't
a
know.
office, but they
These
had
offices look too familiar.
they had escaped the facility at that
Are
point.
they? Okay. I kind of zoned out after the robot fight. It stopped interesting me at that point.
You know what? It was. It's hard for me to recommend entirely because it's an interesting piece of cinema history, just representing a. The movie was made in 1956, so this is at the end of, I would say, the era of the monster, what you would say the classic science fiction films. I mean, these films have pretty much stopped being made once we get into the 60s, and they don't really start again until Star Wars comes out, whenever that comes. Star Wars came out in 1972.
Yeah.
And these big bombastic science fiction films are kind of waning in popularity at this point. So it's an interesting film, but I wouldn't say necessarily rush out and see it immediately. You say don't rush out and see it at all.
I mean, I have to say, like you said before, it's one of those movies that's really, really dry, and it's somewhat dated, so as somebody who's so used to the movies, recently and everything, it's hard for me to get into it, but I do think that if you're into kind of old science fiction-y movies, it's definitely worth a watch, but I'm not too sold on it.
Now, the guy who plays the main character is actually the mayor of Bon Temp in our Bone Temp in
Bon Temp.
Bon
Isn't
Temp
that how you
in True Blood.
Louisiana? I have no idea.
I can't speak
I
Creole.
want to say
or
Bon
say
Temp.
it.
That's how they pronounce it.
Yeah, he's the mayor of
Yeah.
the town.
Okay.
So he's still a working actor. He's 90 years old.
Really?
Yep, and he's still I actually fired an
my
email off to
God.
his agent to see if we can get an interview with him for the next podcast.
That would be awesome.
Talk to him about if he even remembers making GOG.
If I were him, I would put it as far back in my memory as I possibly could.
Well, it could have been fun. Probably hella balled some of those chicks.
Especially that blonde. Are you kidding me?
What, you saw slut in her eyes?
Well, no, not her, but thank you for that. I'm just saying that they had a lot of good. Well, some of the scenes they had good chemistry together. They seemed
Yeah.
really
No, I understand.
well-suited.
She's blonde, so you're saying that she put out for the main actress.
No, they had a lot of good chemistry on screen. Although, speaking of that, I do hate that you're gonna throw this random romance in between them and not even really have any kind of background into it. It's just kind of already established that, like, oh, hey, they both work for the same company and they're also.
It's kind of implied
together.
they have a history. They
Yeah.
don't spell it out, but it wasn't that hard to understand.
Well, no, it was, but it didn't really go anywhere. With
He
it.
kissed her at the end of the movie.
Yeah, while she was in the bed with radiation poisoning. He
And-
could have been a monkey for all she knew.
Well, that's a weird twist. So the movie ends, everyone's happy, everyone's kissing, and then even though their entire research project is a debacle, they launch a satellite into space that's going to... The guy makes it sound like its sole purpose is to spy on every human being on the planet, and that's going to lead us into a new golden age. You're shaking your head?
No, I don't like the idea of
It was a little random
spying
thing, like...
on everybody. I don't really feel like I need to know that what everybody's up to in the world.
I don't really know how that would make things better, but the movie tried to lead us on a happy note that the scientists know what's best.
I guess in some ways I can kind of see the advantage of something like that. Depending on how well the technology is, you could, for instance, see when another country is planning, like, a full-on invasion or something.
Well, I understand it would have some importance, but I don't see how it will lead to a...
Yeah, I agree.
It was a little bit fetishizing technology, a little bit. So that's GOG. That pretty much wraps it up, don't you think? Unless you have something else to add. So 5 out of 5 stars, says the Geeky Senorita.
No, I wouldn't even give it I give it probably about half a star.
Half a star?
Half a star. Yeah, I didn't like it. I don't like that they just throw in random things in the middle of this entire movie.
Plot
I really don't feel like I need to watch two people pretending to, or I don't really know what that whole scene was with those two people dancing just like in like zero gravity kind of situation.
Hold on. There was a scene where, so during the I assume, 5-hour tour of this thing, of the facility. They show a facility where they're experimenting with zero gravity. And to best show zero gravity off, they have 2 ballerinas on staff that are constantly dancing with creepy smiles on their faces and creepy little sequined, sparkling jumpsuits tossing each other in the air.
I would like to point out for my next comment that this was a man and a woman dancing, because the female lead says to, the guy and everybody else, she's like, see, in space there's no such thing as a weaker sex. And the man literally comes back without batting an eye. He's like, yeah, that's why I like it here.
It was a great line. We all laughed. You looked at me and said, I agree with that statement.
I did no such thing.
And I said, thank you. I agree as well.
Those robots, though, they look like Daleks on meth.
The robots look pretty ineffectual. They keep on talking about shooting the tubes on top of the robots to stop them when you can probably just push them over.
Yeah.
They don't have no legs. It's not like they don't have no weight. It'd be like putting a turtle on its back.
Yeah, the frame of the actual robot itself is this huge box foundation, and its arms can't go past the box foundation. So the end scene where they're trying to fight these 2 robots in order to stop this rod from supposable nuclear meltdown or whatever, what all you really would probably have to do is put your foot in front of the foundation of the actual robot itself and stop it from kind of holding a guy back as he's trying to swing with you, like while holding your arms out, kind of a situation. But yeah.
Huh. Well, it was a weird movie. You know what? One of the big bummers about this film, if you did have some interest in seeing it, Netflix is letting their Viacom bundle deal expire. And it's really unfortunate for this podcast because I lost about 100 movies off my Netflix queue because they're all leaving on May 1st, and then Netflix is going to start negotiating on a movie-per-movie basis, which is really upsetting because there was a lot of good, weird, obscure films on that list that are just going away. And there was one movie in particular called Hercules Against Karate, about Hercules,
Sorry, I just had to laugh.
About Hercules fighting ninjas and fighting with karate, and it looked awesome. And I was going to try so hard to squeeze that movie in for our next episode, but it leaves on May 1st, which means we'd have to watch it really quickly and get another podcast up, and no one would have a chance to watch it after that. So I recommend...
I feel like if you really didn't want to watch it, we could, and then record a podcast about it immediately afterwards, and then I don't know how...
I would like to do movies where people can watch on Netflix, either before the podcast goes up or after the podcast goes up, so they know what we're talking about.
Okay.
If it's just gone, and God knows if you can even get a copy of Hercules Against Karate anywhere else, then
I can't take that name seriously. That's ridiculous.
It was gonna be great, and are the
makers of Gymkata.
Gymkata, if that ever gets on Netflix or any streaming service, it's one of the best cheesy movies. You've never seen Gymkata, have you?
I've never even heard of it.
It's a movie about a guy, a gymnast, who has a specific form of karate, using his gym moves and his karate moves.
And it's gymnastics as karate, too.
Yeah, it's just called Gymkata.
That's ridiculous.
And he gets involved in a tournament in, like, Mongolia or something like that involves, like, think of The Amazing Race, but with death. It's just... all these people running this gauntlet of obstacles, horses, nets,
well, you're
spears.
telling me that The Amazing Death doesn't have any death in it?
The Amazing Race doesn't have any death in it.
Sorry, yeah.
That's all right.
Totally messed that up.
No, the joke works. Yikes. So
it's kind of like The Running Man, as if they're all prisoners and they're trying to escape this gauntlet of just shenanigans that are happening, and they're all running away on this course, prisoners getting demolished by things like arrows and pitfalls and things like that. And
no, it's fantastic. And at the beginning of the race, some poor extra looks like he's legitimately almost trampled by a horse.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah,
That's
it's really cool. You see the guy get knocked over by a horse and go right into the fetal position.
Oh,
man.
That's really... But unfortunately, that movie's not on streaming. The next movie we're going to be discussing is Arena, the 2011 film starring that hunk from...
Kellen Lutz.
Kellen Lutz and Samuel L. Jackson. Kellen Lutz is a firefighter who's kidnapped because he's good at fighting, and gets thrown into an arena-like tournament that's being broadcast online. Samuel L. Jackson is running this tournament.
It was like a Gladiator-esque kind of situation with Kellen Lutz.
Kind of like Gladiator, minus the acting, minus the talent.
Well, no, I wouldn't say minus the talent. I mean, Samuel L. Jackson's really good.
Samuel L. Jackson is always been a good actor when he wants to be, but he also loves money. And if you look on his IMDb, he is just in, I guarantee you, if you go down that list, dozens of movies you've never heard of, just because he loves that paycheck. And I think he's just very business-minded, and he knows that he'll be popular with his Avengers and his other roles, no matter what he does. So he just he'll just take whatever stinker gets thrown his way, which includes movies starring Kellen Lutz.
Oh, I so want to defend Kellen Lutz, but he's so terrible. Gosh.
Kellen Lutz, yeah. Kellen Lutz makes, what's the Indian child? The muscular Indian child?
Oh, Taylor Lautner.
Kellen Lutz makes Taylor Lautner look like Patrick Stewart.
Oh, man.
It's pretty rough.
I think that's a little harsh.
So anyway,
We saw that Abduction movie. That was terrible.
No, Abduction was terrible. I saw that with
awful.
103-degree fever. Okay, really quick before we leave about Abduction. So Abduction is, we won't be ever make a podcast about this movie,
That
but
movie was terrible.
I do feel it's worth noting. So the movie Abduction, if you watch it, stars Taylor Lautner, and he finds out he's been kidnapped, or he's a missing child. He's hanging out with his girlfriend, they're on the internet, because apparently the whole missing milk carton thing is a little outdated.
And apparently that's what high school kids do, is they literally go on missing kids' websites and just make fun of all the kids they see.
That's the joke, that's the point I was going to make. So they're on the internet, and they're going to, the writers have to find a reason for him to look on missing kids. And so what they do is they just look at missing kids from the 80s, and they start making fun of their celebrity lookalikes, and that's how he stumbles across his picture.
Yes, because apparently having a school project or doing a journalistic thing for the school newspaper or any kind of other motive or any kind of reason why he would be on a missing kids site is just too far-fetched. High school kids don't do assignments
These two
anymore.
assholes, these kids have been like molested and raped to death and thrown in lakes and buried in woods.
Some of their bodies have never been found.
They're all
just things
dead
like that, yeah.
and somewhere, and they're looking at him going, yeah, this kid looks like a young Danny DeVito. Ha 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 ha. What a horrible. Anyway, enough
Taylor
about...
Lautner, this is why you can never be in movies.
Yeah, that was his like big shot too.
Yeah.
It's gonna be direct to video. I always tell you, you always make fun of me, but I do think that P-Rat, RP, what are they?
R-Pats.
R-Pats.
No, P-Rat I think is a little bit more
I think R-Pats is a real deal actor, and I think K-Stu is a real deal actress.
geez.
I think once they get over this Twilight stuff, I think they're both gonna find success.
I will give Robert Pattinson this credit. I think I read an interview somewhere where he said that he legitimately hated playing Edward.
Yeah.
Like it was like one of his least favorite roles, like ever. Although the only movie I can really ever remember him in, and I know he's been in other ones, but I know he was in the Harry Potter one, and he was decent in that.
Yeah, see? There you go. Decent.
Oh, yeah.
All
I
right.
haven't seen his other movies, so I don't know. But
Shovel face.
back to GOG, I do think.
Oh, we're over with God.
No, I want to talk more about GOG
All right.
because.
What are your final thoughts on
My
God?
final thoughts, I do think that crystallization of that scientist dude and him just like shattering in 1,000 pieces was pretty amazing.
So the most amazing part to you happened within the first 1 minute?
Yeah, which doesn't really bode well for the rest of the movie.
All right, so that's GOG. The next movie is going to be Arena. It can be found on Netflix instant viewing. We're going to try to mix it up and maybe do a Crackle or a Hulu movie next just to, I don't know, have some kind of variety. I don't want to buzz market Netflix all day. They're not paying us anything.
Maybe if they start, maybe we will.
Netflix, if you start paying us, I'll stop talking about Hulu and Crackle. Wink,
I
wink,
probably
nod, nod.
won't.
What? Man, once that Netflix money starts flowing in.
I might change my tune, but until that happy day, nah.
All right.
Nah, dog.
So that's episode 2. That's GOG in the books. Mary says it's terrible. You give it a half a star out of 5?
Half a star out of 5. Yeah.
I give it at least 2 out of 5. I actually, at least just even for the look of it. And the novelty of, I don't know.
The novelty of a killer robot, really?
It's nice seeing nothing but white people in a movie. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
That might be why my eyes are burning at the end of it. Too much brightness.
What a horrible thing to say. Why would you listen to this podcast? All right, so that wraps it up. Any final thoughts? Final thoughts?
Final thoughts? Nope. If you're into that kind of genre, old science fiction movies, go ahead and see it. If not, don't waste your time.
All right, Tim, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, we'll see you next week with Arena.